Welcome to Kim MB's Campfire Chat. I'm so excited that you're joining us for our third episode. Joining us, as always, for every podcast is our podcast producer extraordinaire, Brian Murray.
Yeah, you can't get rid of me that easily. I'm in every episode.
That's right. And we also have a special guest, Jessica Ross from Martini Marketing, will be joining us as well a little bit later to talk about this really important topic. You know, I'm really stoked about today's episode. We have a great topic to discuss. One of the reasons I wanted to launch this Kim MB business, the public speaking, the podcast and whatnot, is because I have a passion for education, teaching, and training. Obviously, that's a big part of who I am. But I also have this commitment or this need to want to inspire others. And I think one of the greatest ways to do that is to provide information and inspiration to help people really take a close look at their lives. You know, whether it's a small goal you want to accomplish, or maybe you have a big dream in your heart that you want to launch. That's all part of the reason that I'm doing this, is I want to help you in any way that I can. And today's topic is critical to the achievement of any goal or any dream that you have. It's the foundation for taking any leap and moving forward with your life. So as you know, we start every Campfire Chat. We need a little kindling to get this fire started. So Brian, I'm going to toss it over to you.
Well, see, you're lucky because there was a fire sale, so it's a 2-for-1 today. I'm going to give you 2 pieces of kindling content to get this started. So first off, fun fact, did you know that we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day? And of those thousands of thoughts, 90% are the same as the day before.
Crazy.
It is crazy. Now, that's the average person. I probably have about double because my mind is just racing. Secondly, since Kim is all about quotes, I found a quote online the other day when I was doing a little bit of searching. The quote goes, "If you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done."
Ooh, I could have, my office is filled with quotes, but that's a good one. I'm going to have to find that one and add that somewhere. That is a perfect quote for today's topic, comfort zones. Today, we're going to talk about why the comfort zone is so appealing to us and why stepping away from that which is familiar is actually good for our brains and our satisfaction with life. This past weekend, I watched the movie Free Guy. It was in theaters, I think this past August, I believe, but it made its way to Disney Plus. And I had coworkers and friends, my youngest son, you got to watch it. It's so great. And I thought, well, the previews looked fun also. It stars Ryan Reynolds, so, that's a win. Plus, it's rated PG-13. And for those of you who know me, that's sort of my kind of where I tap out. I'm like a PG-13 kind of woman. Like I always say, if I avoid PG-13, lets me avoid things I don't want to see, like, major profanity, graphic violence, and naked people who I do not know. I'm like, this could be the perfect movie for me. Now, I don't want to be a spoiler for anyone who's not seen the movie, so I'm not going to delve deeply into anything about the movie, anything more that you might glean from watching the preview. Free Guy is the story of Guy, a bank teller who discovers he's actually an NPC, a background player in an open world video game, who decides to become the hero of his own story, one he rewrites himself. The movie was perhaps the best illustration of the contrast between a life lived inside one's comfort zone and a life lived outside one's comfort zone. And as I was watching the movie, I knew I was going to be doing this podcast on the topic of comfort zones. And so I kept grabbing the remote and pausing because I was like, oh my God, that is the best line. And I grabbed a notebook and I was jotting things down. So many wonderful lines in that movie. But one of the classic lines came early in the movie. Guy was walking along with his friend Buddy. Now remember, Guy's a bank teller and Buddy is the bank security guard. And Buddy says to Guy, "I love my life. There's something about finding your lane and just staying in it." And Guy replies, "Well, that's why they call them comfort zones. They're so damn comfortable." And at this point in the movie, both characters are living safely in their comfort zones, not questioning their day-to-day lives or their roles, just going through their daily routines every single day. Comfort zone to the max. But at one point in the movie, things change. Guy steps away from the comfort and routine and does the unexpected. And in that moment, his view and outlook on the world in which he lives is forever changed. With time, his perspective changes from that of being so damn comfortable to one in which possibilities and the unknown are actually more intriguing to him. My favorite line in the whole movie is when Guy says, "The point is, we do not have to be spectators to our own lives. We can be whatever we want." I loved that line. The movie was packed with so many great life lessons. I would encourage you, if you've not seen Free Guy, totally watch it. One, it's filled with, lots of laughs. Laugh out loud moments. It's hilarious. But so many awesome life lessons in that movie to inspire you. The comfort zone. We hear that term a lot. What is the comfort zone? Is it an actual legitimate thing, or is it just a term we throw around when we're trying to convince our friends to join us to do some crazy adventure? Come on, step outside your comfort zone. The comfort zone is actually a psychological state in which things feel familiar to a person. When we're in our comfort zones, we feel like we are in control. We have low levels of anxiety and we have low levels of stress. The reality is that our brains actually crave that which is comfortable and familiar. Likewise, when we have even the slightest thought of doing something unknown, our brain's initial response is fear. After all, the unknown is uncertain. And with uncertainty comes the possibility of physical or psychological risk. Now, the brain doesn't want that, right? The brain wants to keep us safe. So that feeling of discomfort prevents us from doing out of the ordinary things. Instead, we retreat back into that which feels comfortable, safe, secure, warm, and fuzzy in our comfort zone. As Brian mentioned earlier in our Campfire Kindling, we each think 60 to 70 thoughts a day, which again, crazy.
Actually, Kim, we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day.
Of those thoughts, 90% are the same as the day before. Those thoughts lead us to the same choices. Makes sense, right? These choices lead to the same habits. So like Guy in the movie Free Guy, if we don't consciously make the decision to seek out new information or experience new events, then our minds are naturally going to cave into the brain's desire for the familiar. If we keep thinking the same thoughts, we'll keep doing the same things, and then we wonder, why does my life never change? So you might be saying, well, Kim, what's wrong with that? What's so bad about sticking with the familiar? There is absolutely nothing wrong with being comfortable in our lives. But as the saying goes, nothing great was ever achieved in a comfort zone. More importantly, did you know that to make the most of our brains requires leaving our comfort zone? A recent study by Yale, published in the journal Neuron, found that uncertainty actually signals that you are unsure of your environment, you're unsure of your skills, or you're unsure of both. But it's this uncertainty that signals your brain to kickstart learning. So while uncertainty may make us uncomfortable, it's actually essential to help us make the most of our brains. To figure this out, scientists actually taught a group of monkeys to hit various targets for the reward of juice. Sometimes the odds of a particular target producing a juice treat were fixed. For example, the monkeys consistently got a reward like 80% of the time for hitting this specific target. Sometimes the target was more unpredictable. The frequency with which it paid and the amount of juice the monkeys received varied. Now, here's the interesting part. The team of neuroscientists then measured the monkeys' brain activity while they were playing this game with the targets, and a clear pattern emerged. If the monkeys could predict how often a target would pay off, brain regions associated with learning basically shut down. When the monkeys could not guess what would happen, their learning centers lit up. Think about it. This makes sense. Once you've figured out the best way to behave in an environment, learning new ways to do things or new approaches are pointless, right? You've figured it out. For this reason, stability is kind of like the killer of learning, which is fine for some aspects of life, like the route we take to get to work each day. I take the same route every day. I have a 30-minute commute, and I put my signal light on then to exit. And I'm thinking, gosh, I barely remember, the drive because it's just so much a part of our routine. There's no more learning in that route. But in most areas of life, especially in our professional endeavors, we want to continually improve and learn. To do that, you need to avoid the easy and comfortable, and you have to take on the unpredictable and sometimes the challenging. As fate would have it, it's actually during these moments of uncertainty where we feel the most uncomfortable. that we typically grow the most. I think we can all look back over our lives and define specific moments and experiences in which we took a step away from the ordinary. We did that which we would not normally do. We took a risk. We faced uncertainty, and we grew. When it comes to stepping outside of our comfort zones, I do want to differentiate between what I would call thrill-seeking and purposeful risk-taking. Thrill-seeking activities force us to move outside of our comfort zones. There's no doubt about that. Roller coasters, zip lining, skydiving, whitewater rafting. These are just a few thrill-seeking activities that will give you that adrenaline rush. And for many, it falls well outside of our comfort zones. I recall a time when I was working at a university in northern Wisconsin. I had a staff of 8 college students. Part of the department's training experience was team building activities. So we spent one day doing a low ropes course in the morning, and then we were scheduled to do rappelling in the afternoon. Now, it's important for me to share with all of you that I am not a fan of heights. I am super wimpy when it comes to heights. Many say their greatest fear is public speaking. I say, throw me on a stage with a microphone in front of 1,000 people. Just don't make me go somewhere really high because that will freak me out. Asking me to rappel off a cliff equivalent to 6 or 7 stories, hard no. I don't want to do that. So before we left for our team building adventure, I shared with my team, hey, love you all to death, but I want you to know I am completely freaked out by heights. So I promise you that I will happily participate in the low ropes course that day. But once we get to the rappelling, that's just not going to happen for me. I will assist you guys in any way to support your efforts. I will be your biggest cheerleader, but I will not be stepping off the edge of that freakishly tall cliff to rappel to the bottom. My team was very understanding and supportive of my choice. So after the ropes course, we ate lunch. And then we headed over to the cliff, for the rappelling adventure. I stayed at the top, of course, a good distance from the edge, because that was not my comfort zone. And I would watch my team, and they were all, doing amazingly well. And as each team member made their way down, they'd shout from the bottom, Kim, it was awesome. You can totally do this. And I'm thinking, when hell freezes over. So my last team member actually made their way down and to the bottom, was all excited. And then the guide who was leading us through this adventure looked at me and said, hey, Kim, I will do this with you. I will rappel right alongside of you. I know that you can do this. I'll stay with you the entire time. You can do this. At that minute, every fiber of my being is shouting, no, don't do it, Kim. Don't do it. But then I looked down at the faces of my team shouting to me, you can do this, Kim. And I think, for the love of frickin' Peter Pan, I have to do this. I'm the leader of this team. So I thought, oh, for the love. So I remember getting all roped up, putting on my helmet, and I looked at the guide and I said, I hope you packed like an extra pair of underwear for me, because I promise you that once I get to the edge of this cliff, I'm going to lose all bodily control. And he laughed pretty hard when I said that. And I said, dude, I'm not joking. And I ate a big lunch. So I'm just giving you forewarning. I remember as I made my way to the edge, you have to hold on and, you yell rappel and you have to lean back. And I thought, I'm going to have a heart attack and die. I'm not going to make it through this. He was great. He walked me through it, and down we went slowly but surely to the bottom. And I was greeted, of course, by my team, hugs and cheers. Definitely a step way, way outside my comfort zone. A huge rush, to be sure. Would I do it again? No, not at all. Once is enough for me. Did it profoundly change my life? Again, no, not so much. But heck, it did make for an entertaining story on this podcast, so I guess it was well worth it. It was certainly a moment I will always remember, but ironically, it was less about the rappelling and more about the experience I had with my team. I guess it did make me realize that we can do that, which makes us uncomfortable, and we can actually live to tell the story. Thrill-seeking is good stuff. It does push us outside of our comfort zone, but I believe that purposeful risk-taking takes far more courage and produces far better, longer-lasting results in our lives. What do I mean by purposeful risk-taking? When we take calculated risks to advance our personal lives or careers, we put ourselves in a mode for long-term growth. Calculated risk can mean different things for different people based upon your personal comfort zone. For some, a calculated risk could be something as simple as accepting an invitation to a social gathering filled with networking opportunities. Now, for people who are super outgoing and extroverted, they're like, there's no risk there. What's the big deal? That sounds like a good time. But for many, many who are more introverted or do not like those types of massive social situations, that's a terrifying thing to do. So yet it's purposeful. You take that risk, you put yourself out there. There might be great rewards. You can make a contact that can really help you with your career. Other examples of purposeful risk taking: applying for a promotion at work. Now, notice I didn't say getting the promotion at work. Just applying for a promotion takes a risk. There's a lot of thought and time and energy that goes into that. Making the decision to invest in a business opportunity, another huge purposeful risk. Picking up and moving to take a new job in a new state where you've never lived before, that's a huge risk. Now, I have to confess that for me, when it comes to my professional life, I have always lived well outside my comfort zone. I have moved more times than I can count to states where I knew absolutely no one, to take on a new job and advance my career. I bought a franchise in an industry that I had no familiarity with. Just recently, I left an educational role in the corporate world to take on a COO role in a world of engineering and automation, having no understanding of either of those things. Taking those big leaps outside of our comfort zones is definitely challenging. Leaving the known for the unknown is downright frightening. I have done it numerous times, and trust me, that is far scarier than rappelling down a cliff. So let's talk about what it feels like to take those big leaps. Joining me at the Campfire today is Jessica Ross, owner of Martini Marketing, which launched in 2021. And also jumping in this discussion is producer Brian Murray, who also launched into entrepreneurship as well with his own business, Brian Murray Media. So welcome, Jess and Brian.
Thanks for having us.
I'm back.
I'm back. Oh, yeah, he's been here the whole time.
That's right.
I am a little disappointed because I was told Joe Burrow was going to be here.
You told her Joe Burrow was going to be here?
That's how she enticed me
You missed
here.
him. He just left.
Oh, my gosh. If you don't get that, you have to listen to the last episode.
Jess and Brian and I all met. We all worked at Coney's Corporate. That's where I served as the Chief Learning Officer. Jess was Director of Brand and Marketing, and Brian was the video producer on the creative team's video department. We all left there within a few weeks of one another. Jess was the first to go, and I left about 2 weeks later. And then about a month after that, Brian left as well, off to bigger and better things. We all know that taking a big leap outside of your comfort zone is not an easy thing to do. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So Jess, Brian, talk a little bit about the emotions you experienced as you prepared to make the leap from the known of having a job and, the salary that comes in on a regular basis to the unknown where you were going to start your own thing and no idea how that was going to turn out.
Well, the first word that comes to mind is terror.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would 100% agree with that.
I can't tell you how long I actually mulled over the decision because of how emotionally distressing it was. I was at Kona for almost 11 years, and I know I sound so young, so that's shocking to the listening audience. But really, honestly, it was the only career I ever had. That was my entire career. I had a few jobs here and there before that, but I started there when I was 23, and thinking back of how little and young and naive I was at 23 to then leaving, as an almost 34-year-old and literally not knowing anything else was terrifying. So terror is a really great word to use for that because it is just the unknown.
Right.
That's what's so scary about it. And my mom was like, okay, but what's the worst thing that could happen? And I was like, I leave and nobody wants to hire me. Nobody wants to work with me. I don't make any money. I have to sell my condo and move into your finished basement. And she was like, and would that be so bad? And I was like, you know what? No, it wouldn't. You have a lovely basement. But it kind of put things in perspective for me where, cause she was like, you'll be fine, but that's also not going to happen. So that whole idea, I don't know, my mom kind of gave me that net, you're jumping into the unknown, but it's also it feels really, really scary. And you don't always have that net. But for me, it was okay, that kind of gave me the courage, I think, to step out and do it. And she was right. I still own my condo. I did not have to sell it and move into my parents' basement. But I think just there was a lot of sadness mixed in with it too. I think there's a lot of I'm very change averse just in life in general. And I don't like change. And I think there's a sadness and like a mourning period that comes with there's a third of my life that I was there, which is insane to say. And so I think that part of it was really sad. Like, I do think there was a sadness to that. Would you agree, Brian?
I agree. I went through a lot of the same emotions that you went through, just kind of in various different stages. I feel like every job I've taken has been a leap of faith. You know, like when I left college, I started my own production company with my friends, and I was like, I'm going to invest a lot of money into this and we're going to be successful. Spoiler alert, we weren't that successful. And so it was like, okay, so that's not the next step. Okay, maybe I'll become a teacher. And so then I part-time taught for 3 years and I worked with the students, and I was like, this is great. I'm not making any money. I'm also working 15-hour days because I started working at Kona while I was also teaching. Between 15-hour work days where you would wake up at 6 and go help the kids, then go to Kona and do all your video work, go back to school, run rehearsals. I was like dead. I was dead on arrival.
I can attest to that, as his desk was right next to mine.
When I came to Kona, it felt like a dream job. And I was like, this is finally what I want to do. It's in my field. I get to make fun, like sound design videos, run a podcast. Like, I'm a wheel in a machine where I feel like needed. Like, this is great. And so slowly, as like the years went on, I was like, this dream doesn't feel so much like a dream anymore. It like feels like it's starting to kind of turn into a nightmare in some ways. Like, I felt a lot of sadness, obviously, like jumping into the next thing and leaving something behind. But I also felt a lot of like, you know what? I know what I'm worth.
Right.
And like, I know that like I'm worth more than I'm currently being given. And I remember going home to my mother and
Moms, thank you. We know you're listening. Thank you for everything you do for us.
Laurie is such a great soundboard. She was like, I'll support you whatever you do. I'm like, well, you're my mom. Obviously, you're going to support me whatever I do. You got to like, go ahead and make that money. And I was like, but there's got to be more to life than just making money. Like, I shouldn't have to feel so much emotional distress when I get home from the office that I have to lay in my bed for an hour. And so I made the decision to jump, and I have never looked back since.
And one of the things I want to mention, just a theme I'm picking up from both of you as you're talking, one of the scary things about making that jump and, taking that big step is the unknown, right? Mm-hmm. You don't know what's going to happen. And so you have that fear, like, what if this doesn't work? And I think every time during my career, and again, I made that jump probably, 6 or 7 times where I'd pick up and move and not know anything. And what I would always say to myself is what you said, Jess, and what your mom said, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? I'd always say to myself, you know what? Okay, I've never been to Philadelphia before. I can do this. I can live in downtown Philly and work at Temple University. I don't really know a lot of people. I'm sure I can make this work. But I thought, even if it doesn't, let's say I get there and I'm like, ugh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I'm not really happy here. I'm like, I can do anything for 1 year, right? 1 year. That's all I have to do it for. And it's a new experience. And then boom, I'll do something else, right? And
it's the Kimmy Schmidt mentality. You can do anything for 10 seconds.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And I think I think we always think long term, like I'm going to be doing this for the next 5 to 8 years. And you can't think that way. I think when you take that leap, you have to say, I can do this for 1 year. And then if it's not working, you go back to doing what you were doing before, do something different. I think that's a big part of taking the risks. What do you think was the biggest challenge you faced after you left? You stepped away from your comfort zone. You're starting your own gig. What was your first challenge?
Time management.
I would say that was bad for me too. Yeah. Initially, yes.
It's almost like when you're a kid and they give you like $10 and like, you can buy whatever you want in the candy store. And you're like, and so you run around like, I can buy everything. Like, you have so much time that it's like, oh, I will sleep until 11 and then I'll watch a movie at 2 p.m. It's like, but you didn't get any work done today, Brian. Like, what are you doing? For me, it was like, okay, I need to set a schedule. So that way I know, like, okay, from like 9 to 11, you work out, you go home, then you eat breakfast, lunch, whatever you want to call that time of day. And then from 1 to 5, you work, and then you eat dinner. And then like, it's just coming up with that set schedule and realizing what your time is worth. Find that balance.
Right.
Yeah. I think for me, part of it was that. And somebody gave me, Roman gave me some really good advice when I left of like, if you're financially able, just take some time and figure out what you want to do next. And just like chill, because you've been running full speed for 10 and a half years, that if you can, and I think that's just it's a lot of people's mentality of like, okay, I'm out of this, now I'm going to run full force into the next thing. And
for our listeners, Roman?
So Roman is a friend of ours who ended up being a business contact through Kona that I actually found on LinkedIn. We just became fast friends over the years, having worked together. So he took a leap. Talk about getting out of your comfort zone. He actually did exactly what I did and has been way more successful so far. So kudos to Roman. But he had a very specific niche that he wanted to hit. But he left a job that was similar to mine at Kona's and started his own business and did that 7 or 8 years ago, maybe. I called him to let him know, like, hey, I'm leaving, Kona. We had a business relationship and we had a nice chat. And he was just very kind and encouraging in that regard. But for me, it was honestly like a lot of it. The legalities of like starting your own business was like, I was like, I don't know how to do this.
I remember getting texts from you like, what does this mean?
I was like, where do I go to do all of this stuff? Consider myself to be a reasonably intelligent person and I am struggling. But and for me, more or less, it was like, okay, so what do I actually want to do now? Like I had ideas of what I wanted to do. My thing on my website is that I'm a Jess of all trades. I think having worked at Kona for as long as I did, and really starting when it was like definitely in the startup phase, and anybody who's worked in a startup knows like you just wear a lot of different hats. And because you don't have the capital or the money to like hire a huge corporate staff, it's not even wise to do that.
Right.
I remember my first couple months at the office, like the CEO asked me, so you can like code websites, right? And I was like, oh no, I can't. Just because I was born in the 80s doesn't mean I know how to code a website. But you end up learning skills that you didn't think you would ever learn, or nor did you want to learn, really. I feel like there was a lot of different things that I could do. And I was like, okay, so but what do I want to do? Like, what is the next step? And to some extent, I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. But I know the things that I think I'm good at and things that I enjoy doing. And so being able to kind of narrow that down, saying no was hard.
Right.
First coming out, because I was like, I have to make money. You need this? Absolutely. You need that? Sure. What do you need? I don't know. I'll apply a floor graphic vinyl. Yes. I feel like, you just start saying yes to everything, which again, kind of goes back to the time management that then you're like, I said yes to so many things. And now and am I even enjoying doing those things, So that was a big one for me too.
No, I totally get that. I also struggled, and I still struggle with being like, okay, so like my friend needs this thing. So I'll charge you less because you're my friend. Right. And like, I just want to help you achieve your dreams. And it's like, my dream is to have a stable income. Right. So maybe help me achieve my dreams.
Right. Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's an ebb and flow. Every day is a learning experience in the world of freelance. And so you never know what's around the corner. Like little did we know we would, shoot photos for the Bengals this year.
Yeah, that was fun.
Or little did we know that we'd be doing this podcast, like you never know what's around the corner, which is half the fun of it.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, like you were saying earlier, like so much of learning happens in that uncomfortableness, like outside of the comfort zone. And I feel like I have learned so much the last 10 months that I've been out on my own because I've had to. Right. I was like, oh, well, I gotta file an LLC. Perfect. I don't know how to do that. So I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of truth to that. Of like, you don't really grow until you're.
And tax season is right around the corner. So fire up. That's really fun.
I've already started.
Oh boy.
It's hell. Yeah.
So last question for you today. What advice would you offer someone who's contemplating taking that big leap outside of their comfort zone?
Wear a parachute.
Maybe don't tie a lead stone to your ankle before you jump out. Yeah. I think I go back to what my mom said and what you kind of said of like, what's the worst that could happen? Now, there are some instances where like, the worst that could happen is actually really bad. So maybe don't do that. You know what I mean? Right. Like plan accordingly. Like there is an amount of intelligence and wisdom attached to getting out of your comfort zone, right? Mm-hmm. Like I hate being outside my comfort zone. I hate it. I hate it. And I think when we were kind of talking about this, I actually was thinking, I was like, okay, so how often do I actually get out of my comfort zone? And it's very rare. And I think as adults, it's very rare. So I work with a performing arts studio, 3-year-olds through seniors in high school. And I watch them and I go to their recitals, I do their shows, I do all this stuff. And I'm like, and how often children are pushed outside of their comfort zone because they don't really have a choice. Right. To some degree. So you're like, no, you're doing this. You have to take this class. You have to go to school. You have to. And then when you get to be an adult, it's like, well, I get to choose everything. And so you often choose things that are in your comfort zone. And so what maybe I was like, okay, so if I'm looking back on the last 10 years of my life, what is something I semi-chose to do that really put me out of my comfort zone? And that was an acting improv class that I don't know that I wouldn't say that I chose to do it. My friend Jocelyn teaches at the studio. And my friend Justin was like, you should do an adult improv class. And they were like, oh, I would love to do that. I've always wanted to do that. And he was like, great, I'll go if you do it. And then somehow I got roped into it. And they were like, well, you were there. And I was like, well, that doesn't mean I want to do it. But as any good friend, I went and supported them in that endeavor. And I wanted to die. It was an 8-week class. And every Thursday night, I was like, just shoot me. I would rather be anywhere but here. Because you tend to stick to things that you're good at, or things that, as it turns out, not so great at improv. And specifically, it was really interesting. Like we talked about it a lot because I was like, it's funny to see how people's brains work. Like there was probably 10 of us in the class, and I was like, there's different improv games. And I was like, oh, like I'm really good at the word games. But if you like ask me to act something out, or like there's one game where you just have to speak gibberish, and I was like, my brain literally can't do it. Like it's like it can't. It's like grr, 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 like it just stops. But it was good for me to be in those situations, and I kept thinking that the whole time I was doing it. I was like, this is good for me. I hate it, but it's good for me. Kim's good about getting out of her comfort zone. I think more than most adults that I know. Having moved and done so many different jobs and things like that, starting a podcast. But if you're not good at it, and you know you're not good at it, try something small.
Yep.
Don't leave your job, tomorrow if that's not something that, everybody, we're going to get all these like comments that are like, I left my job. Yeah. Like I listened to your podcast and I quit my job. Like, oh my gosh, please don't do that. Unless it's the wise thing to do.
Purposeful risk taking.
Yes. Purposeful risk taking. But I think it's good just as an exercise in life to do things that make you uncomfortable, because we don't tend to do that as adults.
That's great. I've always enjoyed the phrase like marching to the beat of your own drum. Like life has a rhythm to it, and not just like the rhythm you hear in your head when you're walking down the street. I don't
hear a rhythm when I'm walking down the street.
I look like Peter Parker from the third Spider-Man movie, where I'm just dancing down the street half the time. Like I think life has a rhythm. And the biggest thing for me is if you're going to take a step outside of your comfort zone, if you're going to try something new, like establish a rhythm. You don't have to go all in immediately. It's not like 100% like, oh, I have to fully commit. Let's say, for example, you want to learn to swim. It's clearly outside of your comfort zone. You will drown if you dive into the deep end.
Right.
Like start small. Like do some breaststrokes in like 3-foot water if you're above 3 foot. Like things get easier over time. It's like if you're trying to be healthier, when I started running a half mile at a time. Then I started running a mile at a time. Then I did a mile and a half, then 2. And now I'm up to like 5 miles whenever I run. And like I can never feel my legs, and that's okay. But I'm out there and I'm doing it. I'm trying to be healthier. Establish a rhythm. It gets easier. I think you have to do something 21 times to establish a habit, is what I was told in high school.
Well, who knows if that's true?
Right. It clearly stuck with me. I said it at least 21 times because I remember it to this day. The worst thing you can do when you take a leap like this is to feel like you've not gone anywhere. Like I make the joke about jumping without a parachute. Like, yeah, it's terrifying. But at the same time, if you have that positive rhythm set in place, if you know your systems and processes, like you're making small motions in the right direction, it will come. It's just a matter of time. Everything takes time. The most precious commodity of all.
That's right.
Can't tax that, America.
Well, I appreciate you guys joining me for the podcast today. So many great insights. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest things sometimes about stepping outside your comfort zone and taking new opportunities is you meet amazing people that become forever part of your lives. So for me, I'm grateful to have met Jess and Brian during my Kona Ice adventures. So even though that adventure is in the rearview mirror for me, it's great to continue to have those relationships. So I think that's a huge bonus of stepping outside your comfort zone and taking some risks. So thanks again to Jess and Brian for sharing their insights. Big leaps are never easy, but they are most often totally worth it. Are you ready to step outside your comfort zone? The key is figuring out where you want to grow and being willing to say yes to opportunities that will lead you in that direction. Purposeful risk-taking. As Jess and Brian noted today, start small. Remember, your brain likes the safety and security of the comfort zone. Push past that by stepping away from your daily routines and taking purposeful, calculated risks. What separates individuals who excel from those who don't? It is their willingness to push themselves outside of their comfort zones. Remember, if you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done. As we wind down our campfire chat today, it's time for one s'more thing. So Brian, that's all you.
All right. Today's one s'more thing is a little bit of homework. The teacher in me is coming out this
Woohoo!
week. So it is the CZ 10-day challenge. So here's the deal. For the next 10 days, we want you to do one thing each day to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Change up your daily routines. Say yes to an opportunity or an invite that you would normally pass up. Try a new food. Tackle one of your fears. One little out of the ordinary thing each day for 10 days. It's time to train your brain by leaving the safety and security of your comfort zone. Are you up for the challenge? Be sure to visit our Facebook page at KimMB Speaks, where we will share some comfort zone challenges for you to consider.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I hope that you will all join us with the CZ Comfort Zone 10-day challenge. The point is, we do not have to be spectators to our own lives. We can do whatever we want. Thanks, Guy, for your advice. What do you want to be? What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to grow? Getting closer to being the person you wish to be and living the life you want to lead is just a few steps outside of your comfort zone. Our campfire is slowly fading, so it's time for our chat to come to an end. Until next time, sky above me, earth below me, fire within me.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 3 of Kim MB's Campfire Chat. Keep the fire going. Visit our website at kimmb.com or find us on Facebook at KimMB Speaks. And don't forget to do your homework. There will be a test on this next week. Stay tuned for the next episode in 2 weeks.